If it was up to me, I would go around and reach out to, like, if you're a vet student, period, and are interested in like vet med and all that stuff, I would love to like talk to you and like really fill you in on what it's like and all that. And especially if you're an African American or if you're Black in this country and like you're like, oh, I want to do this, but you know, like there's not a lot of Black people who do it. Like maybe that means I shouldn't do it. Or even sometimes like within my own culture, you'll hear like, you know, Black people don't do that. Like Black people do whatever, like we are capable, whatever we want. Like we can definitely do it. Like it is something that every day you go to work, it is like very apparent. And it is something that like I'm actively trying to like normalize is if you're interested in this and you have the passion and like, you know, we talk about all the struggles of like being a veterinarian as far as like, you know, the burnout and the mental health load and the debt and all those things. And you still want to do it. Like I think you should, like regardless of your background, 100%.
That is veterinarian and VIN Foundation board member, Dr. Sean Gadson. And this is the VIN Foundation's Veterinary Pulse podcast. I'm Jordan Benshia, Executive Director of the VIN Foundation. Join me as we talk with veterinary colleagues about critical topics and share stories. Stories that connect us as humans, as animals, as a veterinary community. This podcast is made possible by individuals like you who donate to the VIN Foundation. Thank you. Please check the episode notes for bios, links, and information mentioned. Hi, Sean. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
I'm super excited to have you, first of all, as our newest VIN Foundation board member, and then also as our next podcast guest.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm excited. It'll be fun.
Well, as we start every episode, let's start with talking about your veterinary professional journey and how did you find your way to veterinary medicine? Did you have this initial aha moment? Was it something you've always known? How did you find yourself in the veterinary profession?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I had some cool, like, oh my gosh, like I wanted it forever, like kind of story thing. And I feel like when you ask a lot of vet students and veterinarians that, you know, you'll get some version. And mine is definitely a little bit different. I guess for some context, like, so I grew up in like the Bay Area of California. My mom like raised my brother and I essentially as a single parent, and she just, you know, bagged groceries at Safeway, and like, you know, money was tight, and, you know, like our initial upbringing very much reflected that. But my mom always took like my education, my brother's education very seriously. She wanted us to know, like, you can do anything you want. You can, like, you know, go to college, you know, whatever you know, want to do, and we'll figure it out. But as you would imagine, not everyone like in that kind of environment will be as supportive and feel the same way. So I used to hear things all the time that was like, oh, you know, just get your GED, and that's like what all anyone can expect of you. And as long as you make it through high school, you're doing great. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but I just really had this idea that I wanted to do something and like really climb with my education. I had no idea what it was, but I remember being like young, like maybe like 6, 7, like something along those lines. And some like kid in school must have said something like this to me. And I just got fed up. I just got like a super big chip on my shoulder. And I was like, you know what? Like, I don't know what it is, but I want it to be hard. Like, I need something really difficult because I want to prove to everyone that, like, I am very much capable of things like this, and, you know, by extension, my family. So I literally remember going home and like booting up a computer, and I'm going to date myself when I say this, but I remember booting up Ask Jeeves.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
I miss Ask Jeeves so much.
I know.
I was in college during Ask Jeeves, and a couple of my good friends worked there because I went to Berkeley, so I was in the Bay Area, which was super fun. And that's, you know, so we were both in the Bay Area at the same time with Ask Jeeves.
Yeah.
Wait, for those of us, those that don't know, Ask Jeeves was a website that you would pretty much go and ask questions, and it had a little butler there, or a butler equivalent named Jeeves, and that was the dude's name. And so you would ask Jeeves, similarly to how you ask Google now. So okay, so you're asking Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves. I know. I'll have to tell my kids one day that I did search engines pre-Google, and before Googling was a verb.
Right.
So, but yeah. So I go and I ask Jeeves, like, literally I think the question was like, when is one of the hardest like careers to get into? And vet med came up. It was like one of the top searches. And I was like, great, then that's what we're doing, because I have something to prove and I'm upset and blah, blah, blah. And I held on to that. So that was when I was young, like I said, like 6, 7 years old. And I didn't step foot into a veterinary clinic until I was like 12 or 13.
But you held it
so
the whole
literally
time.
for like, oh, I just held it the entire time. I was so mad. And then I just got really lucky that when I finally got old enough, I think I was about 14, to get my worker's permit, and I got a job literally just cleaning kennels at this like general practice in my hometown. And I just happened to love it. Like, I love the people. I mean, I always liked animals and all that, but I just really liked watching the doctors that, you know, they were there at the time work, and how they interacted not only with the patients, like the pets, but the clients too. And I think that's something that like you don't get quite as much, is enjoying the like human to human interaction part of vet med, which is quite a lot of it. And so I just stuck with it, and I worked as a veterinary assistant, man, probably for like 13 years before I applied to vet school, because I did it through high school. I did a master's degree, that was 3 years. Worked while I was doing that too. Did it through like my undergraduate as well. It's another 4. And then, yeah, all the way up until I started veterinary school. And so it was great. I just got lucky, and kind of literally a chip on my shoulder got me to fall into like my passion. So that's my weird, like atypical story about how this all started.
But how incredible. You just think to yourself, I want the hardest thing, and you Jeeves it, and
Yeah.
and you ask Jeeves it, and then you know, okay, this is what it's going to be. And then you stuck with it and found your passion. And how lucky is that, right?
Yeah.
I don't think most
lucky.
people would say a chip on the shoulder leads them in positive directions, or
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah.
or has the possibility not to. So I think it's wonderful that this did for you. And so you went to undergrad, and then what did you get your master's in?
Yeah, so kind of a random story too, but so my master's is actually in biomedical sciences, and I actually studied a human disease called Polycystic Ovary Syndrome. It is actually like a very, very like debilitating and tough disease that women will get, and it essentially has all of these like, you know, metabolic like issues that come with it, things like you know, fertility problems, and like you know, weight loss, and like, you know, hair growth and things like that. And so both like physically and mentally can be a really crippling disease. So, and unfortunately, like the history of the research behind it, honestly, as a lot of research is when you look back, you know, a little bit, was very like male centric. Like you're studying a disease that really affects and debilitates women, but in like male models.
Right.
So I did that for 3 years, got to talk to a lot of women with PCOS, and that was such a great, like, humbling experience to hear their stories. Wrote a thesis, and then right as I finished that project up was when vet school started calling. So I finished that up, wrapped it up, and I think, you know, I was at Central Washington University, and I think they're still actually working on that project and like building on the research that we did as like a, you know, with the base data that we got, and then I headed off to vet school.
Wow. And I mean, how amazing that you focused on that. That's definitely a topic which I think with women's health right now is getting more visibility, as very well deserved. And that's definitely a topic that we're seeing getting more coverage too, which I think is wonderful. And how exciting that you were part of that, right? And part of that on the human level. Cool. And then now, so you get into veterinary school. Where do you go?
Oh yeah, so I went to UC Davis for vet school, and I mean, once really like in my life the idea of becoming a veterinarian and all that started gaining traction. I mean, I was like born and raised in California, so like that really did become like the forefront, you know, of my thought. But to be like completely transparent, I mean, I love Davis. It was amazing. I had a great education, but definitely as the logistics of going to vet school, and I'm sure we'll get on this later, but like in the cost and all of that started to come into play, it became less and less about like Davis being like my shining, you know, goal on the hill, and more about I need that sweet in-state tuition so bad.
Right.
So yeah, so I luckily like, even though I was in Washington, I wasn't there long enough where I,
Switched residency.
was not considered.
Yeah,
Yeah,
got it.
exactly.
Okay.
So then I got to maintain my California residency and do the in-state tuition there.
Okay, so that was going to be one of my questions, which was, where did you apply?
Oh yeah, it's a great question. I applied all kinds of places. Davis was definitely like my top choice. But I mean, I've sent out applications to like Georgia, Oregon State, Penn. Where else? There's a bunch. Colorado, where I am now,
Right.
ironically. Yeah, I was very much not. I have never felt like any one vet school clearly gives any like superior education or anything to another. Like, I've been lucky enough to have mentors who come from like all different kinds of vet schools, and they all do great medicine. So, I mean, the in-state tuition definitely was something I really wanted to focus on. But if I had ended up at like another school, like, I would have had no problem with that. So I really just shotgun the application out.
So did you send out, because we've had some pre-vets recently asking these questions, and I'm just kind of curious, did you apply to like 7 or 8 schools, or do you think you applied to 10?
No, I did a little more. I think I did 10 or 11, something like that. And that thing about that too, that they don't really tell you very much until you start like doing the application, is that the more schools you apply to, like, that cost racks up.
That's one of the reasons I was asking.
Yeah. And so it very much was like, like, I would have loved to apply to more. But logistically, I was like, especially at that time in my life, I was like, okay, we can max send out this number. So yeah, I think I did like 10 or maybe 11 schools. Yeah.
Yeah. And UC Davis is great. Not only because you get that in-state tuition, but then they also have this grant where each student gets about $7,500 a year towards their tuition, which they don't put on their website because it's sort of, ebb and flows, but that's also a huge benefit. And so that can really be, I mean, for sure, one of the most cost effective, absolutely, if you're a California resident. So, okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So you go to UC Davis, and how was that experience for you in veterinary school?
Yeah, I mean, vet school honestly was amazing. I know, like, a lot of people will talk about it, like, and you'll talk about like the effort and the struggle, and you're up late, all the time and all that, and studying, and those things are all true. But like the wonder of like what I was doing never really faded, like, while I was there, just because it was something like that I wanted for so long. And I mean, to be totally honest, like, when you go into a profession like that from like, in an underrepresented community as a Black man and all this stuff, like, really the gravity of like what you achieved as you're like going through it and doing it, and like, hopefully setting an example for other people who really want to do things like this. It was just a huge deal. Like, and that's, I think, is a big reason while I was in vet school, I had this really great, I'll never forget, I had this amazing conversation with my mother, maybe it was like a week before I actually like started going. A week before, they call it prologue, which is like your like intro. Like, I think it's like a week or 2 weeks. And I remember I'm about to head over, and my mom, I was talking to her, and she was like, you only have 2 like obligations, like, while you go to vet school, and that was to get like every opportunity you can out of it while you're there, and to stay yourself while you're doing it, was like what she told me. She's like, those are the things. She's like, you have been an assistant for all these years and never changed who you are for anybody. You applied to vet school, did your master's, all that, you've been Sean like the whole time. Like, stay that way.
Right.
Even though, there aren't a lot of people with your background who end up doing this. And I was like, fair enough. Like, okay. So, and honestly, I credit so much of the things I did in vet school to her for that conversation, because, that thought in my mind is so much the reason why I like was so involved with like school clubs.
Right.
Like, I was really big into like VBMA and SAVMA, and trying my best to make not only my vet school experience really good, but better it for like other vet students too, because I all of a sudden had this, like, I was in this community that I've been trying to break into for over a decade, and I just really wanted it to be like a good special experience, only for me but for other people. And so I was worked hard in school, like, was very involved in extracurriculars, met some amazing people, some like incredible mentors who like have fundamentally like changed my life, like, on the way through. Like, shout out Jim Clark, Paul Pion, like, you guys are amazing. I feel like they took me seriously before I took me seriously, and like, yeah, it was just an incredible experience. I'm rambling, but I love vet school. It was crazy but amazing.
Mentors are really important, and to be able to have them and to hear your mom's advice and to take that. I mean, being in veterinary school, huge time consumption
Yeah.
on its own. And then on top of that, SAVMA, VBMA. And so SAVMA, we should just tell our listeners, a lot of them will probably know what it is, but if you just want to explain SAVMA and VBMA.
Yeah, definitely. So SAVMA is the Student American Veterinary Medical Association. Essentially, it is the student arm of the AVMA, which is, of course, like a very large like advocacy group for the veterinary profession, like in general. So I was president of SAVMA, of UC Davis's chapter of SAVMA, while I was at UC Davis. And essentially what that would entail was like going to a few conferences every year, like advocating, for what SAVMA would bring to the national AVMA as far as like our position on certain like legislative, opportunities and things like that, and really trying to affect like students in vet med like as a whole. And that was amazing. Like, I love that. And then kind of more in the day-to-day at UC Davis, SAVMA specifically will like oversee a lot of the other student organizations. At the time I was there was over like 35 student organizations, all that do incredible work, like facilitating interests of vet students. So it was things like, helping manage scheduling for student events and like fundraising opportunities, and then, disseminating like scholarships to students and certain funding opportunities, and also partnering with like Davis's legislation. I got to speak with our dean at the time, it was Dean Michael Lairdmore, and work with him on like a bunch of good opportunities too, to kind of expand the opportunities for students in vet school. So that was SAVMA. And then VBMA is the Veterinary Business Management Association, and I was vice president of that organization while I was at Davis. And that is really focused around facilitating more business education for veterinary students, which is something that is insanely important. And I think over time we are seeing that become more and more part of like, or that is considered more and more knowledge that veterinary students and veterinarians should know.
Absolutely.
And I have always had an interest in practice ownership myself, so that business bug was always there. But essentially what we did was we had like a bunch of talks and like events centered around people who, have their career involves some aspect of, business ownership or, facilitating business in some way in veterinary medicine, and talking to students about it and like why it's important and, what their career paths look like. And, I also did some traveling and went to conventions for national VBMA, and that was amazing too. I learned so much, and especially like, as time goes on, I think veterinarians love to feel like, oh, they're separate, like from the business aspect. Like, you go in, you do the medicine, and you go home. But I think more and more in reality, we're seeing that, some level of business acumen is really helpful, like in your day-to-day job. So I think that expanding that skill set is really important.
Yeah, because a lot of people get into veterinary medicine because they love animals, but a lot of it's dealing with people, right? Yeah. And we all come with all of our own challenges. Yeah. And having that business aspect, I mean, there's a lot of aspects from a practice perspective from almost similar to sales, which sounds so weird. Yeah. But there's that aspect too. And so it seems like so many that are in VBMA, it can be so helpful. And same with SAVMA, just having that engagement. And so it seems like you took advantage of a bunch of resources while you were in school. Were there some resources that you wish existed while you were in school that didn't, or that you found like missing, or you had wished would be there in hindsight?
That's a really good question. I think, when I think back on that, I guess the biggest things I think, because those resources that I wish, I guess they are out there. I just wish that they were more utilized, or like more people really took it, knew about them. But I would say for me personally, the biggest resources were like my group of friends were amazing. And I really rallied around, like at the time we were living with like a couple other students who were like, in a four in a house, and they were amazing for sure. The leadership opportunities were great too, but not only the ones I was involved with, like, even as involved as, it sounds like I was, I really wish I did take
Right.
more advantage of other like student clubs that were there, like, even though I'm an emergency clinician now, like I really didn't do much with like the emergency, like ICU club, that Davis had. And I wish I would have, like, I think that would have been a great opportunity. I wish I had used, been more involved in, student leadership groups centered around like diversity inclusion, like in vet school. I definitely did some of that, but I definitely underutilized like, those resources for sure. And I wish that I had taken, a lot of the mentors that I have, I met like outside of like a student club or something like that. I met them in other ways, but I wish I had taken like one of those opportunities for like a structured like mentor mentee program, and like really made it a really purposeful decision from the get-go to like find, like, I have amazing mentors, but they definitely found me. Like I wish I had been more deliberate about seeking that out, because I think a lot of students don't, and then without even realizing it, they've potentially robbed themselves of like what an amazing opportunity those relationships could be. So I wish I had known that would have been so important early on. And then I guess that's it. And then of course, like, there's all the ones that you think about standard that definitely the majority of vet schools have, but students, for some reason, it's just hard to get them to go and do it, which is like, the career planning center, like we have Claw at UC Davis, or, which is like the career leadership and wellness, office. And they do amazing work there. It's not only centered around helping you like get a resume together and, holding talks and all that, but, you can get like counseling and things, opportunities through them. And that is definitely something that I wish, like mental health especially, I wish I had taken much more seriously as I do now, but that early on in my career. I'd say those are the big ones. Yeah.
Well, and it's hard because we all have only 24 hours in the day, right? And we really, at the end of the day, it's how we prioritize all of it. So it's tricky because prioritizing SAVMA and VBMA are two huge priorities, right? And then on top of it, the other things also. And so in hindsight, it's always easy, but I think it's good to just think about those things, because I similarly agree that I feel like I took a lot of advantage of things when I was younger, but I still wish I had done more, right? And, and so in hindsight, I'm like, man, I should have done more in this and more in that. But, we have this scholarship that we're now in our second year of, and one of the things we heard a lot from students is they really were curious, like, what's one piece of advice you would give us as we start veterinary school. So I'd be curious for you, like, what's one piece of advice you would give a pre-vet who's, we've got the VIMCAS, they're about to close here in September, and a lot of pre-vets that are applying, and then also a lot of pre-vets that are right now in their either a second or third week of starting or about to start in the next couple of weeks. What's some advice you would give those students in hindsight?
Yeah, for sure. I know what it is, like, immediately. And it would be something I hear a lot, I guess. Like, I know you're gonna go and you're gonna like be in lectures and labs, and you're gonna be accumulating like all of this like book knowledge, and that is, I can't stress how important that is. So like, definitely like work hard in your classes, like you want to have a good understanding, but offer two pieces of like perspective. One is, I would say for me and a lot of like, my friends who are now, out practicing veterinarians, I think we all agree that vet school really is a basis for what you are going to learn in your first, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, whatever, out in practice. Like, so, and it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I'm sorry to like shatter the like news, but like when you graduate vet school, they hand you your degree. You're not going to be like, oh, I know everything, I know how to handle everything. Like, there is still so much learning, and like I said, so much of who I am, the vast majority of who I am as a clinician, has been on the basis of my vet school knowledge, but built after that, So and the reason I say that is because what I don't want you to do is get so like bogged down with chasing the like 4.0 that you do not give any time to extracurriculars, mentorship opportunities, things like that, because those things are gonna, I would say, are just as important in getting out of vet school than like the baseline knowledge that you're going to get and build upon when you leave. So please, like, be a student, but also be a person and explore things like outside of the classroom. And then the second one is, I think in vet school, like, I don't know if all vet schools are doing this. I know at UC Davis, they do. But they will teach you some communication, and there's like a doctoring course, again, like shout out Jim Clark, but which is centered around like not so much the medicine, but like being a veterinarian. So like talking about medical mistakes and how do you bring up the euthanasia discussion and all these things that you're gonna do, like if not on a day-to-day basis, like most of your days. And I feel like a lot of the students see that as like a soft skill. And so it's kind of like something that they go to the class, they're trying to get through it. But I cannot stress to you like how important really it is to like get good at those things. Because to be honest, like a lot of the stuff, like you're learning about like neurologic pathways and all these things like that. And you definitely have that somewhere, but I can't tell you how many times I've been like, oh, there's something like there, I don't remember, let me VIN it real quick, or like let me look up another resource, let me grab this textbook. So you can always like call that information back, but once you leave school, no one is going to teach you how to be a human, like how do you move forward and like lead with empathy, how do you connect with all types of different clients who have differing beliefs from you as far as like where their pet is, their importance in the family unit, all of these things that these things you need to navigate every day. So like those things are just as important as any other like exam class you're going to take. So don't just treat them like, oh, it's a soft skill, I just need to get through it. Like take those skills seriously, and they are going to help you immensely once you leave if you cultivate those.
That's really a good point. I think your idea of that it's not just being a good veterinary student, but how to be a good veterinarian. And being a good veterinarian has all these different aspects, right? Because it's not just how you can practice the medicine, but it's also how the interpersonal skills and dealing with challenges with the clients, but then also within other staff members and other colleagues, right? And that in and of itself is a whole skill that if you're able to understand that and get some practice with that and some mentorship with that can be so beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I get like, I get being younger and really like why that mentality really like ekes into your mind, because, and I think vet schools are starting to see this and getting better and better about, how they do their admittance processes now. But when you apply to vet school early on, like what you think is that, oh, what makes a good vet student makes a good veterinarian. And in an ideal world, you'd think those things would be like same, that those skills would translate.
Right.
But it doesn't, like always. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's great that, you're getting like incredible grades, you're a 4.0, you cured cancer and you were 10, like all those things that you need to do to like be competitive for vet school.
Basic, yeah.
But you're going to find really quickly that once you step out of the purview of like an academic institution, there's no more barrier between you and like the populace, like, in the outside world. And there's a whole separate skill set that, at least right now, I think is really undervalued, that you're like, man, I really should have like, taken the time. And it is much easier to learn it early on, especially in vet school, when, mistakes don't cost you very much, than it is when you're in practice, and you're trying to maintain a sense of professionalism and give off the sense that like, you can trust me with your family member. Like I know what I'm doing, where, a tough interaction can be more costly for sure.
Yeah, Dr. Paul Payan says it all the time that, mostly the veterinary schools look for good veterinary students, and it's really like we talk about with the scholarship, like we're really good at looking for good veterinarians, right? And the reality is that the only way that we learn in life is through mistakes, right? We don't learn when we get things right. We learn when we get things wrong. And throughout our life, we're going to be getting things wrong. And as long as we're learning from them and being willing to show up with compassion and empathy and looking to improve as humans, then, we're doing it right.
Yeah.
But I think that those are very good aspects, and the soft skills being extremely important and critical.
Yeah.
Okay, so you go to UC Davis, you have what sounds to be a very engaging
Yeah.
experience. You've attended a school where ideally it's going to cost you the least to
Yeah.
attend. So, yay. You're understanding there's no Harvard effect.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so what do you do when you graduate veterinary school? You're done with UC Davis, and what's the next step for you?
Yeah. So while I was in school, I was definitely trying to figure out what my path would be, and I had some great conversations, with again some awesome mentors, and ultimately decided that ER was really like when I built what I wanted my life to look like. Emergency medicine definitely helped facilitate that the best. Which is on a side note, how I think more people should consider their career. I think you kind of get lost a little bit, especially students, in expectations like, oh man, I really need to specialize. Like, what do I need to specialize in? Or my family really
Right.
wants my family, they're all this type of practitioner, so I should too. But I would encourage you, instead of doing that, to go, what do I want my outside life to look like? And then what career path facilitates that best? Like at the end of the day, it is a career, it's a job, and that career should facilitate other aspects of you. And so I'm sorry, vet students, but you're going to have to figure out other aspects of you when you leave vet school because there has to be something else. So I wanted to do ER.
Well, and what was it about ER for you that when you said worked for what you want in your life, what was it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I guess a couple things. I would say the big thing is I really wanted as much of a family life as I could. And I always felt like working 5 days a week, whether it's 8 hours or 12 hours, I'm still exhausted. You know what I mean? You're not doing much for the rest of the day.
Right.
So in ER, where you're more likely to get a job where you're congesting fewer working days, but the days you work is longer, that sounded great to me, because I was like, fine, I'd rather work 3 to 4 12 to 15 hour shifts and then have the rest of the week off. That sounds great. So the schedule did. And kind of by extension, I really want I met my wife while I was in vet school. She was at their human medical school for UC Davis. She's great. I can rant about her all day, but I'm not going to do that. And so I really want to say,
just a little shout out.
Yeah, little shout out, Mollie. Love you. So super proud of you. But yeah, so I really wanted to, as marriage and all that started to become part of the equation, I was like, I really want to be present. I don't want to be an absentee spouse. I don't want to be, I want to have kids. I'm really, I love the idea of being a father one day, and I want to be really present for my kids. And so all of those things, as I tried to say, what gets me as much of that as possible, ER just gave me that, or, was giving me those opportunities. So that's what I ultimately went with. And I love the medicine, and also, I'll be honest, the kind of people who work ER, I fit in really well with those kinds of people. You know what I mean? It's everyone's insane multitaskers and talk really fast and are okay with the building burning down, and we'll figure it out. And that's just very much my vibe. So I just fit in really well.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you thought ER, and out of UC Davis, you're ER.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to do ER, but I definitely felt again, talking about vet school, building, being a basis for knowledge. I walked out and I was like, okay, there's no way I could handle a GDV, something straight out of vet school. There's no way if someone came in with their congestive heart failure chihuahua that I'd be like, oh, I got this 100%. So I wanted more training. So I did a year-long small animal rotating internship at a specialty hospital near Sacramento. And that also, you don't hear this a lot, I feel with internships, but I loved that too. That was great. It was work. It's a very high volume hospital. But again, the people I met there, the friends I made, more mentorship, it was just incredible. So it's not that it wasn't difficult. It just makes such a big difference when the people you're shoulder to shoulder with are on the same page, and you feel valued and all of that. So that was amazing.
Right.
And then did that for a year, and then right when I finished my internship, Mollie, my wife, she applied in the match for her human surgery residency. She's going to be a surgeon, or I guess she is a surgeon. She is a surgeon. So
might want to just clarify.
Yeah. Sorry, babe. Yeah, you're a surgeon. So it just worked out really well. So she moved up here to Colorado, where we are now. I think it was 2 months before me, and then I finished up internship, and then, came up here after her, and that's where we've been since. It's been 2 full years now. I think we're working on our third out here in Colorado.
Okay, so you're 2 years out into Colorado, or working on your third. You are now 3 years out. What year did you graduate?
2021. Yeah,
right?
so I'm 3 years out.
2021. Yeah. So you're 3 years out. Is ER still fitting you very well?
Yeah. I love it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great. I think, again, I think I very much was deliberate in how I came to the conclusion I wanted to be an ER clinician, and I feel like I had good reasons of why it fit for me. And I know, it's no secret that the longevity of people's career phases in ER is not very long. Like, you do it for 5 years or something like that, and then a lot of people will jump ship to something else. And I don't blame them. It's tough, it's challenging for sure. But I will say, again, essentially 3 years in, including my internship year, I really like it. I love the interactions I have with people. I love my coworkers. And maybe something crazy will happen in the next couple of years, but to be honest, I see myself going longer than 5. I've got gas left, for ER. So, and I think it's a good sign, right? If I'm not feeling it's work, but if I'm not feeling mentally, emotionally, physically destroyed, 3 years in, and feel like I've got more for this, then, that's a good sign to me.
It is. And, our Vets for Vets confidential support group found that if veterinary colleagues were thriving in their first 5 years out of veterinary school, they tend to thrive throughout their career, nice. And vice versa. If they were struggling in the first
oh, thank goodness.
5, so you're over 50% of the way there, Sean. But along those lines, to your point, emergency can be very critical,
yeah.
and very high performing. How do you find it easy, or how do you keep a balance in the midst of that, or do you? Is that something that you find that you're able to do, or that you're learning to do, or what is your feedback on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I think what really helps me, wake up every day and not dread going to work. I have to give it to the people I work with. They're incredible. But I will also say, in general, not just in my career, but in life, period, I don't tend to take myself too seriously. So, I always every day the goal is to be better, right? So right. I'm always asking myself at the end of my shifts, what good did I do today? Did I really help anybody? And then, once I kind of give myself those props, I say, okay, no, but honestly, where could we have done better? And that's just not in the medicine sense, but, could I have handled a situation with, one of the support staff a little bit better? Or could I have communicated this to a client in a better way? And I think what that allows me to do is every single day, even in a small way, is easier than the one previously. So, now doing that for essentially 3 years, doing those self-assessments, just a couple minutes every day, has really helped me stay on track as I try to grow as not only medically as a clinician, but as a doctor, as a full person. Right. And I just think that helps a ton. And I guess the other thing too is I have a lot of camaraderie with the people that I work with, because they know that, whether you're a doctor or, a nurse or assistant or a receptionist, whatever the case may be, is that in my view, I am not more important than anybody else. So I think when I kind of make it very clear that in my view, we have different jobs, but as far as necessity, we are all lateral, I value you guys so much. And I think that really helps foster great relationships with the people you work with. And so I've had some really awesome, very vulnerable, conversations with people I work with. And it just feels really good to be, trusted in that way. Or when, a case comes in and I want to do something a little bit different for whatever reason, even if, say this nurse is not, familiar with this dose of medication, or handling it this way, or using this sedative protocol, whatever the case may be, there is what, I I trust Sean. Like he knows what he's doing. Like, of course we're gonna double check, we'll fact check the math, like all that business, but I know he has a reason for this, and so I'm gonna trust him on this. And that work environment just, I think, makes all the difference, to be honest. Yeah.
Camaraderie is vitally important in all aspects in our life, and to be able to have that in a work aspect is so important. That's why I started this podcast and stories, right? Is the ability to be vulnerable and share, and that's how we connect as humans. If we're not willing to be vulnerable and to share and to show vulnerability, then how are we going to connect? Because nobody wants to hang out with somebody that thinks they're always right.
Yeah, yeah.
And nobody's going to really trust somebody that feels like they're always right, because none of us are always right.
Yeah.
If we're able to work on being a better human every day, that's really a lot of what it's about. And I like your approach there and how you're approaching that. And I think that's really the best thing that you could do for a balanced mindset, is to begin with, like, I don't totally have it all figured out, right? If you're like, oh yeah, I'm the most balanced person, I'm total zen all the time, I know exactly everything that's going on, I'm always perfect. Nobody would trust you, because they think like, that's not real.
Yeah, that's not real. Yeah. And it's wild too, because in a sense, like, it's a little counterintuitive, but really I've learned that, like, by being vulnerable and admitting, like, to my team, and I'm like, I don't know, like, I have to do some research, like, we'll figure this out. But honestly, like, hands up,
Right.
like, I don't know what to do here. Like, you would think, like, the forebrain thought is like, oh, they won't trust me because they know I'm capable of, like, not knowing what to do. But in honesty, what I found is that they trust me more because I can admit, like, when I'm either, like, out of my depth or, like, don't know what's going on, right? So
Right, exactly.
yeah, and it's just like and it's nice. And honestly, like, the people I work with, like, it's good to have, like, friends at work. Like, I'd hang out with them, you know what I mean, outside of work. And yeah, I just think, I guess the other thing too is, because I had worked as an assistant for so long, when I'm asking them to do something, there is no, like, oh, Gadson wouldn't do this. Like, he's just making me do it, right? Like, I've done it. Like,
Right.
I've done it. Like, I know what I have a very good sense, like, when I'm asking you, like, to sedate the, like, aggressive dog and all that stuff. Like, I know that's challenging because I've done it. So I think that also gets you a certain amount of, like, social capital, like, in that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you understand that, right? And there's compassion for what they're going through. What do you see are a few of the important topics, based on your experience in the veterinary profession as a recent graduate?
Yeah, I guess I can think of the three that really come to mind, that you deal with essentially every day, at least for me, is how, like, clients specifically perceive, like, veterinarians and, like, the veterinary industry. I think there's a lot of, like, I tell people it's almost like when you go to buy a car and you're going to buy a car and you're like, okay, I need to buy this car, but I'm already kind of, like, nervous that they're going to try to get one over on me. You know what I mean? Like, there's, like, a suspension of, like, there's, like, a little bit of a wall there. And whether or not that is true, like, in any sense, like, you come in with that notion. And I think some of our clients come in that way too. So, like, bridging that gap and, like, making them feel like, you know what, like, you came to me and, like, I am your partner in this. Like, I am your advisor. As a veterinarian, like, I am your advisor. I cannot tell you what to do. I can only say, based on my training and, like, what I know, like, my experience, like, I think this would be the best way to try to get, like, a maximal outcome for your pet. But ultimately, other things come into play, right? Like, belief systems and financial, resources and all these other things. So you have to balance all that. So how we are seen, and kind of keying into that early on in the interaction, definitely, like, comes into play, like, quite a bit. So I do my best to listen to, or read the news when it pertains to vet med, or, like, listen to podcasts and things like that, because I really want to know, like, what information and what's, like, narrative are people getting about, like, my job and, like, my industry. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, and it's hard because, as humans, we never see the full cost of our bill.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because of insurance.
It's true.
With vet med, there is so much from a cost perspective. It seems like that's a big barrier,
Yeah.
right? And so hard for colleagues to get over and understand. And then the pet insurance industry, and there's a lot there. Okay, so that's one
Yes. Yeah.
perception of, veterinarians and veterinary medicine.
100%.
Yeah.
So that's one. I would say, even though I've talked so much about how much I love this job and I have like tons of gas left for it, I would say, like, from kind of like an outside looking in, like burnout and like high staff turnover is something that, a lot of clinics like all over the world deal with like all the time. And I think honestly, as my role in vet med has changed, over the last like 17, 18 years, whatever it's been, like my perception of that and like why that happens has like definitely shifted. Like, I think in a better way. Like, it is like, it's not people who are just like, I need more money and you're not paying me enough and I'm just going to like go and like bounce. You know what I mean? Like, it's really people saying like, hey, at least in my experience, it's like, hey, I like really like what I do. Like, it's exhausting, but I need more, like, I need to feel more valued, or I need more mental health support, or like I need more money to be able to afford to live, as like, it's, no surprise, things are crazy expensive and it's getting harder and harder to keep the lights on anywhere.
Right.
So like, I think burnout really is like the best word for it, because it's not that the majority of people like want to, jump jobs all the time and like, at some level everyone wants stability. It's nice to be able to, go in and do the thing and, feel comfortable where you are.
Right.
But yeah, you're going to see that if you're not experiencing it yourself, well, I think everyone does at some point in their career, like myself, not like, myself included. I'm sure at some point I will feel that way. But you're going to see it in your friends and your colleagues. So that is something that is, I think nearly essentially unavoidable for you to experience at some stage, and knowing how to handle that yourself and do your best to advocate and support for other people who are experiencing it, I think is really important, like, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I think the last one, I guess especially for me personally, I would have to say like diversity, like DEI, like diversity, equity, and inclusion in vet med for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't meet, this sounds so wild, but it's super true. I didn't meet another Black veterinarian until I was like in vet school. And that is that, and at that point, like I said, I had been, cleaning kennels since I was 14, and I started vet school when I was 27. So you're talking like 13 years of like moving and working as an assistant in multiple places and not like knowing another African American veterinarian like for over a decade in the industry. And that really put into perspective, like, man, like it kind of makes it feel a little heavy too, because when you're in vet school doing it, you feel this sense of like responsibility to really like represent and like be the example that shows like, no man, like we should be here, and to go around and tell your Black students like, you should be here, like, it's, you know what I mean, like you have something to, like, a different perspective and life experiences that are super valuable. Like my experiences and how that might differ from some of my colleagues has helped me like really navigate some situations like in my career, I think it might be harder if I came from a different background. And so like, seeing that, like that lack of, a group you're represented in the industry you love can be tough, but at the same time, it also really like fills my cup to help be that like for people who are coming up, like behind me. Like I really, like, if it was up to me, like I would really be able to like, I would go around and reach out to like, if you're a vet student, period, and are interested in like vet med and all that stuff, I would love to like talk to you and like really fill you in on what it's like and all that. And especially if you're an African American or if you're Black in this country and like you're like, oh, I want to do this, but like there's not a lot of Black people who do it. Like maybe that means I shouldn't do it. Or even sometimes like within my own culture, you'll hear like, Black people don't do that. Like Black people do whatever, like we are capable, whatever we want. Like we can definitely do it. So
all of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think like it's just like it is something that every day you go to work, it is like very apparent. And it is something that like I'm actively trying to like normalize is, you know, if you're interested in this and you have the passion and like, you know, we talk about all the struggles of like being a veterinarian as far as like, you know, the burnout and the mental health load and the debt and all those things, and you still want to do it, like I think you should, like regardless of your background, 100%. So that is definitely something that, you know, a topic that comes into play in my career, you know, all the time.
Well, and I think that you've just had an open call here. So if anybody's interested and they want to talk to Sean, reach out to us and we'll get you in touch with Sean.
Yeah, definitely.
Or if you know somebody, like absolutely. I think that it can be anytime that we're doing something new where there's not a path sort of set out ahead of us, we just don't know, right? And just knowing that somebody with similarities to you have walked that path, even if it's not the exact same path that you'll walk, just that they've walked that path, right? It can be so helpful and so soothing and like just give you encouragement. And so if you know somebody that wants to be a veterinarian or has similar paths, like Sean's here, he's putting himself out there.
Yeah, please. I would love to. And it's funny, you know,
we challenge you to reach
do it.
out.
Yeah, send an email. No. So, but you know what's funny too? And you don't, I have this story where you don't even realize like how important that sense of community is until I remember once I was at an externship in my 4th year and I was going around like kind of like testing out places where I might want to do an internship, and I walk in for my shift and one of the veterinarians there was a black man, and we looked at each other, we make eye contact, and we're like, hey, like, dude, what's up? All this stuff, and all the nurses like, oh, do you know him? They're like, never met him in my life. Like, you know what I mean? It's so funny. Like, it's just, it means a lot. So yeah, if you like are interested in this industry, like want to talk to somebody who like, you know, definitely knows what it's like to try to like carve out that path themselves rather than like having something more laid out, like reach out to me. Like I would absolutely love to talk to you for sure.
I love it. That's it. That's the call. It's an open call right here. Are there, you know, we've talked about a lot of resources that are available. We've talked about the ones that you think that new grads should really focus on. Is there anything else you want to leave the audience with, or other sort of tidbits or piece of advice or information that you think would be good to share?
Yeah, I definitely think, I guess I'm going to try to keep it short because I know I've been rambling like this whole time, but I'm going to go. Yeah, I know. I'm going to try my best here.
No, we've covered a lot of great stuff. I don't think we've been rambling, but
good. Okay. So I'm going to go with 2. I would say I would ask something I heard a bunch when I was like a pre-vet student, like trying to, you know, like make this happen, was I had veterinarians like up and down be like, don't do this. Like you don't, like, this is a hard thing. Like, I'm going to save you before you even do this. Like, don't do it. And I think I know like a lot of veterinarians have for sure had some experience where they're telling people in this industry, don't do it. And I am going to put out another call that as a profession, we need to like collectively stop doing that. Now, right, here's what I would say is because that is not to say that the reasons you're giving for maybe deterring someone are totally off base, right? Like it is a very demanding job. Like, you know, like so many veterinarians, like, you know, nurse, like people are underpaid at all levels, like in this industry. There's a lot of like, you know, personal toll, professional toll, you know, it's hard to maintain, you know, all those things. But here's what I would say is, one, I very much have the perspective that if you're deliberate about tackling those issues up front and putting systems in place that really mitigate those stressors, you can have a really good, like, fulfilling career, like, in this industry, 100%. The other thing, too, is I would say is, like, what we don't need to tell people not to become veterinarians. What we need to do is be honest with them about what veterinary medicine is, right? Like, a lot of times as a kid, you, like,
Absolutely.
you romanticize it. And so it kind of hits like a ton of bricks when all of a sudden you're here and you're hearing about all these struggles and things like that, right? So here's what I would do, and what I would encourage other people to do is, if someone comes to you and says, you know, I really want to be a veterinarian, will you like help me with this, like mentor me? Instead of saying like, don't do it, just be honest with them. Like naked truth. Like tell them about the debt, tell them about the stress, tell them how tough vet school is to get into, all of those things. Just be honest. And if they look at you and go, okay, like, mask off, like, I appreciate you sharing that with me, but I still want to do it, that is who we need like in this industry. We don't need people who got into it thinking it was something different, realized it's not what they thought it was, but like the inertia just like kept them moving and they don't feel like they're in too deep to stop and they end up in a job they don't want. Like we need people who know what's going on and say like, I will tackle that. Like that sounds tough. I'm going to work hard to like mitigate those things, but I still love this profession enough that I want to join it. That's really who we need. So I definitely think we need to change the way we talk to young people about whether or not they should join this industry for sure. And then the other one I'll say is, I think my personal opinion is I think the phrase "do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life" is the biggest lie that like we tell people. I don't know who came up with this or like why it's so prevalent ever. It is a lie. It's almost like I feel the same way when people say like love is never having to say you're sorry. It's the biggest lie ever. Like, so, because here's the truth. Like, I love this field. I know a lot of people who love what they do, but it's tiring. Like, no matter what. Yeah. Like, that's just the truth. Like, you're going to go home. Right. You're going to be exhausted. Like, some days are definitely easier than others. So not every single one isn't a grind, or at least it shouldn't be. But, like, I love what I do, and I come home, like, beat some days. But I've had times in my life where I have been, like, you know, a lot more energy. Maybe I wasn't working as hard. And I didn't really feel fulfilled. I kind of just felt like I was sucking up oxygen. And I have had times in my life where, like now, where I am routinely like exhausted, but I feel fulfilled. Like I have a strong sense of purpose, and I really feel like I do help make things in the world better. Like for the people who come and see me, like I feel like I really help my patients, and by extension help my clients. And I would choose exhausted and fulfilled over tons of energy and a lack of purpose every day of the week, 100%. So I just don't want the narrative to be, oh, if I'm tired, that must mean I shouldn't be here. Right. Like, that's not necessarily the case. I do think you should take a self-inventory. Like, I have a calendar event on my phone, like, no joke, every 6 months. And it's an appointment with myself where I sit down and I have a sheet of questions ask myself and answer. Do I feel fulfilled? Like, is the job I'm doing now facilitating me reaching towards larger aspirations that I have? Like, do I hate going to work every day? Am I compensated well enough? And really just check in, because vet med is super easy. Smart. Yeah, and it's just way too easy to like get your degree, get out, work, put your head, down and work for 30 years, come up for air when you retire, and then be like, actually, I didn't do anything I wanted to do. So
right, where did my life go?
Yeah, where did my life go? So just stay deliberate, in assessing where you are in life, and like you drive the train, like you drive the ship. Just make sure that you got the hands on the wheel the whole time, I guess is what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. It's, they call it a job for a reason. They're not paying you to do nothing, right? But there's a scale within that. I love my job, and I feel so honored to be able to do it. And doesn't mean there's not tough days, right? But having that check-in with yourself, where is this really what I want to be doing? Is this what feeds me? And that's going to ebb and flow, because it's life, right? It all ebb and flows. But I think that's really good advice. Okay. My last question is that I really like asking people, because I feel like the answers are really all over. Is, do you have a secret talent or something that you enjoy doing that others might not know about?
It's a great question. I actually, so I don't know, a lot of people may not know, but I have a black belt in martial arts. I did Kaji Kembo. We traveled and did tournaments and all that. Awesome. Yeah, that was awesome. You talk about emotionally, like, and mentally, vet med being tough. That's physically one of the most challenging things, like, ever. But it was a blast. Yep. And then more recently, I've started working on my pilot's license, like my private pilot's license, just to like fly little like single propeller plane and stuff. And that is something that a friend of mine does, and like kind of got me into, and man, I am enjoying it like way more, and I think it's than I thought I would. And honestly, I like it because you need things other than vet med. You know what I mean? Like, it's way too easy to be like, oh, I'm a veterinarian, but what else am I? So It's fun. Essentially, the way I pick hobbies is I go, okay, when I was a kid, if 6-7-year-old Sean, when he was all griped about, you know, and went on to Ask Jeeves and all that, if he met adult me, would he think I'm cool? Like, it's kind of how I think about it.
I love that.
Yeah, like, would kids, Sean...
That's a fantastic game.
Yeah, I think it's fun. It's cool to be like, man, like, 7-year-old me would lose their mind if they're like, oh, we're like a vet and we got a black belt and we fly planes. Like, man, we sound so cool. So that's like how I like to pick my hobbies.
I think that's a great approach, because how often do we hear about people that are comparing themselves to others, right?
Yeah.
But comparing yourself to yourself when you're younger, and if your younger self would think that you're cool, I totally love that. I totally dig that.
For sure.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for taking the time today to share your story. And I think this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Like, I love the podcast, and like, I really appreciate you giving a platform for like people to come and tell their stories in this way. And, you know, this has been a blast. So thanks so much. This has been awesome.
Awesome. And I'm super excited about you being on the VIN Foundation board.
Thank you.
I'm excited to dig deep with you. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Veterinary Pulse. Please check the episode notes for additional information referenced in the podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow, subscribe, and share a review. We welcome feedback and hope you will tune in again. You can find out more about the VIN Foundation through our website, vinfoundation.org, and our social media channels. Thank you for being here. Be well.